I was thrust into the harsh reality of international politics like almost everyone else my age. On the day that two planes crashed into the World Trade Center, one into the Pentagon and another in a field in Shanksville, Pennsylvania. And for the next month, I was terrified that my hometown of Fairview, North Carolina, with a population of 2,700 and a total of 2 stoplights, was the next target. This type of fear that an international extremist group would be interested in a small rural town is silly now, but it's the type of irrationality that 13 years later still wreaks havoc on our country. The horrific deaths on that day birthed the invasion of 2 countries, bombing of 5 more, and handing of unprecedented power over to those within our government who put profit before people and wield swords rather than pens. And that's why I'm at FCNL. 2 other experiences were particularly influential in shaping how I see the world and pushing me to get involved in peace building. The first happened on July 31st, 2011, as I sat in a study room at the University of North Carolina. I was cramming for final exams and looking for anything to do except study for final exams, so I turned to what people my age normally do when they need a distraction: social media. I came across a post from an activist in Syria talking about a major attack happening in the city of Hama. And at the time, I worked for an anti-genocide organization and was tasked with following current events, so I decided to tune in. I found a live video feed from someone living in Hama using a cell phone. And this was during the early days of the Syrian civil war, shortly after peaceful protesters throughout the country demanded that Assad step down and end his 11-year rule. Hama was symbolic because Bashar's father, Hafez, also launched an assault on the city in 1982 to quell resistance from the Muslim Brotherhood. I sat transfixed on the floor by myself, glued to my laptop, watching shaky footage of bullets whizzing through crowded streets and missiles destroying homes inhabited by innocent families. The person with the phone made their way into a makeshift hospital, showing me and the hundreds of other people watching the feed horrific scenes of injured men, women, and children. I had never seen anything more graphic in my life. And minute after minute, the images got worse and worse. Yet I couldn't turn away. In real time, from Chapel Hill, North Carolina, I was witnessing the moral depths of humanity more than 6,000 miles away. And at the time, I was interested in war and conflict, but the images I saw that day will never leave me. They lit a fire that pushes me to advocate on Capitol Hill today in hopes that we can begin to prevent that type of violence instead of watch it rage on. The third moment occurred while I was studying abroad at Trinity College in Dublin. During a long weekend, I took a bus north to Belfast, the center of a decades-long conflict between those who wanted to rejoin Ireland and those who wanted to remain a part of the UK. In Belfast, I expected to see historical artifacts of the conflict like the Peace Wall that divides Catholic and Protestant communities. But I found something else that surprised me: a palpable disdain that still exists between Catholics and Protestants. In talking with cab drivers, people in pubs, and store clerks, it was startlingly clear that members of the 2 groups wanted nothing to do with each other. And in this moment, it became abundantly clear that the barriers we and our leaders construct, as you all know, do nothing but divide us, create artificial hatred, and produce violence. And they have no place in a world built for peace. And whether it's Catholics and Protestants, Hutus and Tutsis, Shia and Sunni, that trip taught me that we have to dig deeper and explore why some people, particularly young people like me, can go from playing soccer in a park and laughing with their friends to picking up a gun or blowing up a plane, and how our actions here in the US can exacerbate or prevent this process. And out of these moments, among many others, I found my way to FCNL. I had never knowingly met a Quaker before applying for a job here, but I knew vaguely of their commitment to social justice. And as I learned more about Quaker history and their involvement in the abolition, prison reform, and anti-war movements, I knew I was going to the right place. And since then, I've slowly learned the basics, often amid giggles from my coworkers. For starters, what it means to let something season. Why meetings have a concern for something. And finally, how to use elder somehow as a verb. And now, because of tens of thousands of FCNL supporters across the country, including all of you, I am able to live out these values when I go to work every day. And so far, alongside Theo and Allison, I've lobbied against bombing Iraq and Syria and for nonviolent alternatives that address underlying causes of extremism. I've lobbied against expanding counterterrorism slush funds that support militaries across the world and for investing in peace building that is geared toward long-term security. And finally, I've lobbied against slashing funding for conflict prevention accounts and for expanding appropriations for civilian-led programs. And finally, this work affects me in the deepest possible emotional and psychological ways, because since I was 9, I've lived in a wartime country. And the new war in Iraq and Syria, and as of yesterday, Afghanistan, means that I will live that way for at least a couple more. It's 13 years and counting that we've been waging the war on terror in Afghanistan, Iraq, Pakistan, and elsewhere, with little to nothing to show for it, except trillions of dollars down the drain, hundreds of thousands of dead people, and a generation of young Americans indoctrinated to believe that war is normal and necessary. And now, perhaps more than ever, I believe we need the Quaker voice, the voice for peace, on Capitol Hill, and I'm honored to stand side by side with all of you and FCNL to channel the frustration I experience and idealism I so desperately cling to into tangible action that begins to reverse the unprecedented turn toward militarism we are witnessing. I'm not Quaker, and I'm not religious, but I do have what astronaut Edgar Mitchell called a, quote, intense dissatisfaction with the state of the world and a compulsion to do something about it. And being in this room with 300 people with the same compulsion is incredibly inspiring. I owe many thanks to the staff at FCNL and all of you for welcoming me into the Quaker community with open arms. And so far, it's been a fantastic, humbling experience, and I couldn't be more excited to continue this work during the next year. Thanks so much.